tell me what questions you have about paperwork, about the licensing process, about the webinars, about why it's so hot in June. It's not even July. Oh, really? Oh, I'd rather much rather have snow in June. Camille.
So I sent in my application, and there's someone that's emailing me.
David.
Yeah.
There's somebody who's emailing me.
So does he do the next part for me, or do I call, make an appointment?
Okay, so what'll happen, so Camille's asking a good question. So all of the applications, when you scan them in or you email them, they all go, when you do that license at utah.gov, license apps at utah.gov, that all goes to a guy by the name of David Dinger. David is fantastic, and he will email you back, so don't be alarmed that this guy is emailing you. He'll email you back, and anything you're missing from your application, he will follow up with you to get that from you, or clarify anything, or just let you know where, what's going on. He sends out all of your reference letters to your reference that you gave him. He will initiate your background check through them, their agency. And then once all of that stuff's back, so once your reference letters are back and once your background checks are back, he's gotten your doctor reference letters in, then he will assign you your licensor, and they should contact you. So your licensor should contact you and let you know what their availability is. Now, every licensor is a little bit different. Some of them are scheduling, there's a couple that are part-time, and they may be scheduling, 4 to 6 weeks out, but I would say most of them are scheduling somewhere around 2 to 4 weeks out. So, but if you're in a situation where maybe you have a family trip planned, or you have a surgery planned, or you're remodeling a room in your basement, and you want to hold off on getting the home study done until whatever that thing is done, you can do that too. So just because they're scheduling out 2 weeks doesn't mean you have to have your home study in 2 weeks. You can say, you know what, the end of July would be better for me, and then they'll schedule you at that point. Their goal, licensing's goal, is to have, once they get your application, their goal is to have you through that whole process in 90 days. So they don't love it if things delay that, but if it's something that you initiate rather than they initiate, then they feel better about that, because at least they're not meeting their goal. It's just because of circumstances, more your circumstances than theirs. So does that answer?
So they'll call me.
They should call you. And I say that just because every once in a while people will call me and say, I haven't heard from anybody, and I can look it up. Like I have access to the database that has that information, and I can always look it up, and you can always just nag David too. You can say, hey David, who is assigned to me? Why haven't they called me? Tell them to call me. And he'll do it. He really is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Did you have a question? I thought you had a question.
And then I was like, oh, I should probably save it for the adoption seminar that you'll do.
Oh, okay. Okay. Is it about paperwork or procedure?
A little bit.
Go ahead and ask it now.
Oh, so if you're interested in adopting like a waiting child
Uh-huh.
out of the state, I hear that you have to have a home study that will license you for maybe other states too, like.
Yeah, so it's a little confusing. So when you get licensed by the state of Utah technically owns your home study, because taxpayer money is paying for your home study, and so they own your home study. And so what they want is, if you get a home study done through Office of Licensing, they want you to be available to take Utah kids for at least 6 months. So they want to say, give us a chance to find a placement in Utah that works for what would work for your family. And if after 6 months there's no kid that will match your family, then we will release the home study to you, and you can then release that to other states. The other thing some families do is they choose to get a home study. And anybody here have a private home study, a current private home study? Because you do have one? Yeah, it's not uncommon. He's like, really, we have one? Yeah, we do have one. You should have been there at the home study, really. You should have been there. He's like, that lady who came and asked us all the questions about our life? That was the home study. So if you have a private study, you paid for it, and then you own it, and you can send it out whenever you want. And they can, depending on where you get them done, they can be anywhere from around $500 to $600 to like $2,000. They can be really expensive. So there's Children's Service Societies generally who we recommend, because I think they're probably the most reasonably priced when they do good home study. And so then you would own the home study, and then you could send it out to different states. But if you're licensed here in Utah, that's really good, because some sending states won't require you to be licensed, but more and more sending states do require your license. So if you're licensed by Utah, then they're going to consider you good. You've taken the classes, you're licensed, your Tylenol's locked up, you have a home study, that they're more likely to place with you at that point. Yeah, so it's good. And we have families sometimes who will look at kids out of state and have a private study, and then they end up in here because the sending state's requiring them to be licensed, and so they have to then go through all this stuff. And I think it's better to get this done before you get interested in a kid, because the kid you're interested in may not be available by the time you get through everything, but once you get done, then you can really start looking in earnest and applying for kids. What other questions do you guys have about the process? How many of you have turned in your application? Okay, it's not very many of you. Tell me what's holding you up on your application. Just the fact that it's that thick? It's like a mortgage application? Actually, it's probably worse than a mortgage application. Anybody, any questions about live scans, getting your live scans done?
How long is it good for?
2 weeks.
So we have to like send our application within 2 weeks?
Within 2 weeks, yeah, within 2 weeks. Yeah, because you can't go that long without committing a crime. So you want to do it 2 weeks.
Does it matter if your application gets in first or your live scan gets in first?
It does, it kind of does matter. Well, they won't get your live scan, so you turn it in with your application. But you don't want to turn in your application without your live scans, because they won't touch it. And then, so it's probably better just to turn your application and your live scans in all at once. Because if you turn in your live scans to your application, they'll be like, well, who are these people? And if you turn your application without your live scans, they're going to think you're a criminal, because you're trying to get kids without a background check. Yeah, so they won't touch you anyway. So yeah, so it's best to do it all at once, because one way or the other it'll.
Is there a waiting period once you call to make an appointment? Can they take you same day kind of thing?
Depending on if they're available, they can if they have appointments available.
Okay.
Yeah. Curtis?
This is just more for everyone's knowledge.
Okay.
The lady that does the life scans in West Valley and Sandy is currently gone on vacation for 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh. So do they have somebody filling in for her?
No, we went to
We had to go to Ogden.
to do ours yesterday because they canceled our appointment.
Oh no. Okay, let me nag somebody in administration. Yeah, because DCFS is really in a crunch to get families licensed, so that's not okay. So I'll nag somebody and see if someone can't fill in for her, because I think she has special training, but I think there's other people who do too. So I think that needs to certainly be taken care of. So, yes. Oh, sorry.
Is the application for kinship and foster care the same?
It's not exactly the same, but if you've gone through the kinship application and then you decide to do general care, it's pretty seamless. I don't think there's anything. I think the application itself is a little bit different, but I don't think there's anything that's so different that they'd make you reapply. Because we've had several kin families who choose to do that, which we're always glad when they do. Jared?
I was just asking if you do hear something back about the life scan, could you just let us know?
Yes, absolutely. I'll send a mass email about it. Thank you. Yes.
I thought we have to finish training before we turn the application.
No. And I think that confuses a lot of people. Part of it is because licensing wants that 90 days, so sometimes they like you to wait until you're almost done with training before you turn it in. But if you're ready to turn it in, turn it in. Yeah, and partly I would rather have you turn it in while you're still in training, because this is probably the point at which you're going to be the most gung-ho. And once you get out of training, then it's easy to think, okay, we'll get to it. And then time goes by and you just never do. And we actually have, right now, we're actually sending out an email to a bunch of families who graduated from training and they either never got their application turned in at all, or they never followed through the process. And so we're going to try to nag them, because the classes have a 24-month shelf life. So once you've done the classes, you have 24 months to get licensed without penalty. And guess what the penalty is if you don't get licensed in 24 months? Yes, you got to come back for classes. And I tell the same jokes and the same stories every single month, so it's not great. It's not great.
I have a question about the fire extinguisher.
Okay.
It says it has to be 2A to BC.
Uh-huh.
Any numbers that are above that?
Oh, yes, as long as you can pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they have them on sale at Costco right now.
Yes, good. So she just asked me about the fire extinguisher. The minimum is 2A10BC, which means you can get a bigger one, as long as you can pick it up, because they have some I couldn't pick up. But she said at Costco, and they're bigger at Costco. And they're what, like 25 bucks?
I think that it was on sale for under 30, which the 2A10BC I only found for 30.
Uh-huh.
It's bigger than that and less than the.
Okay, so it's bigger and less money than the 2A10BC, yeah. So Costco, and I did notice that the Costco had them on, because every once in a while they have the little coupons, which you don't even have the coupons anymore. So that's good. So Costco, always Costco. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
What was the name of the place you said for a private home study? Can you that?
Children's Service Society is probably, I would say they probably are going to be your least expensive option,
Okay.
and they do a really good home study. I think they're a really reputable agency. They're really good. We like them. They also run Grand Families, which is a kin support program, and we really like children's support. Okay, any other questions? Okay, all right. So tonight is sort of like, I always say this, kind of like a night off for me, because it's 2 videos, which I just then process with you guys, and a guest speaker. So I just talk to you guys in between the videos, and other than that, that's all, which is great because they're filming tonight. So I'm like, I can be off screen as much as possible. So the first one we're going to watch is one of the trainer-led videos. So this is the one with the quizzes. And really, after this month's experiment of having you guys do the quizzes on your own, I think that the difference between having a stack of papers on my desk or getting 55 emails every day, I was going to go for the stack of papers. So I think next month we'll just do the quizzes in class like we used to. But I appreciate those of you who've been doing them, after each one and sending them to me. And if you're one of the ones who are just going to do it all at once at the end and send it to me, that's okay too. I just have to have that from you. And maybe I'll do some paper copies too at the end of the last class and just make sure we get them done. So this is another trainer-led video. This is Terry Rowley. She's the trainer in Western Region. Any Western Region families here have been to any of Terry's classes? Anybody been to Terry? She's wonderful. She's so lovely. So she's going to talk about working with biological families. And in your books, look how good you are. On page 80, page 80. You know how to almost completely turn there. Page 80, there are some myths and realities, and Terry uses these to kind of guide her discussion with you. So she's going to talk about working with biological families.
Hello. Today we're going to be talking about working with primary families. How many of you carry a picture of a child with you in your wallet? More likely you have it on your phone. What can you tell me about this cute little boy or girl? Usually people share stories with me about the interactions they have with this child, or they tell me some really cute characteristics of the little boy or girl that they love. Now let's pretend today that you need to go run errands specific to caring for this child. And you take your companion or your spouse with you, if you have one, and while you're out, you're involved in a very tragic accident. Unfortunately, it claims your lives. Now your child has nowhere to go. They come into the foster care system. Do you have some concerns about this? Are you wondering who's going to put them to bed tonight? You're wondering if they know what chapter book they need to be reading? Who's going to pack their school lunch? What if they have an allergy to peanuts? What if they need to be to soccer practice after school? Who's going to be picking up your little girl or little boy? And of even greater concern, does it worry you that your child may be fearful or alone or feeling sad and they don't know how to take care of them? After all, they've never had any interaction with your child. These are some of the very common fears that happen for primary families when their children come into custody. So what can we do? As caregivers, you have the wonderful opportunity to help children bridge the gap from removal back to reconnecting and then to the beautiful opportunity of reunification. You have this immense opportunity to do this for children, and we know that this can be fearful. In fact, we find that it is one of the most fearful and difficult things for all members of the team who are involved. So let's talk about some of the common fears that we find foster parents have when working with a primary family. First, primary families are violent and dangerous people who might be a threat to my family. This is a concern for a number of people. At the state level, many things are put into place to create safety for you. It's of the utmost concern. What we find, however, is that the majority of primary parents have the great capacity of interacting with you and creating a working relationship. So you can plan for that to be the more likely scenario. There is always the other option though. Sometimes families can't work with you. In this case, the utmost of security is created. You will see this in visitation. And what that looks like is in the initial stages of visitation, it's created in a more supervised situation. which allows for families to build a relationship of trust and capacity, and their children are visited usually within the walls of a DCFS office. As that trust builds, we move towards an unsupervised visitation situation. Often this happens at a McDonald's or a park or somewhere that they can play. And then later, as we gain more and more capacity, the family gets to move towards reunification. This means children go home. They get to have visits in their own natural setting, and sometimes they might even have visits at your house if you're comfortable. Now, if at any time you feel like this is not a secure situation, you need to let your caseworker know, because they're going to want to create an opportunity for security for you, and they have the ability to do so. Second, primary parents will be able to do not have the ability to love and care for their children because they've abused and neglected and hurt them. So these kinds of fears often make us think that they're not going to be good parents after all. But the truth of the matter is that most primary parents truly love and care for their children. And they have this ability to want to try and do their very best, but they are not able to due to the circumstances they live in. The level of stress that they're under creates opportunities for abuse and neglect to occur. So let's talk about a for instance. Let's pretend that you're the mother of 3 children, ages 3, 5, and 7, and your child has been sick, the 7-year-old, for the last 5 days with a cold. Now, you've recently got a job at a dollar store and you make about $300 a week. You need every bit of that to make rent this month and also to pay for your food. You're out of your food stamp money, you've used that for the month, so it'll require cash, as well as you'll need gas money. Well, this morning, your daughter has woke up and she has a fever of 102 degrees and she's listless. It's a school day, she should be at school, but she can't possibly go. And you need to be at work. What are you going to do? Here are some scenarios. First, you could send her to your great aunt's house. She usually watches the kids, but more recently, she has been feeling under the weather. In fact, the last time she watched sick children, the result was she got pneumonia. So you could send her there, but your child is not going to get the medical care they need. You will be able to meet your obligations at work and take care of your bills. Number 2, maybe you could call your sister and she could send over her 10-year-old child and your niece could watch your daughter while you are at work. This is a possibility, but this leaves 2 children at home alone and the medical care still won't happen. Number 3, you could decide you need to take time away from work, apply for Medicaid so you could qualify for a free medical appointment. This way your child has the capacity to be seen at a doctor's office. Unfortunately, you're going to miss a lot of work. It may cost you your job. 4, it's possible you could just take them into a medical appointment and pay for it outright. This is going to take away from the money that you've been saving for your rent. And since you've been rent late before, it's possible it could create an eviction opportunity. Then 5, maybe you decide that the best thing to do is to take your child with you to work. You're going to lay her in the back seat, cover her up with a blanket, get her a juice box and tell her, I'm going to come out and check on you throughout the day. This is one option that you could do, and she won't get the medical care she needs, but you'll be able to take care of all of your financial obligations. So, which one of these items would you choose? Do any of these work for your ethical or moral situation? It's not uncommon that we have families who think, I can't pick from any of these. These aren't the best options. But in truth, these are the kinds of situations that primary families often find themselves in. They add additional stress, and while they don't mean to hurt, abuse, or neglect their children, it creates that kind of a situation. Third, I'm going to be responsible for caring for children who are in foster care, and I'm also going to be responsible for taking care of their families. The truth is primary families have a long list of goals that they will be working on in unison with you. But at no time are you responsible for the care of biological parents. That just would be counterproductive to the entire purpose of them moving through the system and becoming more self-reliant. So you can expect that's not an obligation. Now, historically, foster parenting has been a rescuing operation. Many, many years it's been devoted to, can we just create safety for children? Let's take them out of an abusive, neglectful environment and put them into the security of a foster home. And this is one way we can handle things, but unfortunately, it just creates more problems down the line for the system. So in today's society, what has worked best, we have found in the system, is for you to create an opportunity to bond with children with the parents. You form a professional relationship with the foster caring team and particularly with the family that you'll be working with, creating visitation and other opportunities for them to visit. You may be fearful about this kind of opportunity. We've already started to talk about this. It's going to feel like you're diving into a deep pool of water. You have no idea what's in there. You have to swim around and figure it out, and that can be frightening. But let's talk about how can you dive in and have the best experience for bonding and connecting with the children and their families. 1, you might want to improve your desire. Can you end any of the preconceived notions that you have about working with primary families? Are you willing to open up to the possibility of creating a relationship with the family of the children that are in your care? How can you do that? Well, it will require that you be the first to step forward many times. And you're going to feel like you're waving a white flag that says, I'm coming in peace. Please don't fire on me. But the likely truth is that you're going to have many times when you approach with kindness, and you will need to secure opportunity with this family that demonstrates, I truly desire to build a working relationship with you. Here's some simple things you can do. Talk to them. Ask them, what does your child like to eat? Tell me how you soothe them when they're upset. If you're in a room, and you frequently will be, you'll find that families look at you for answers. They start talking to the foster family when you're in a team meeting, asking questions about the child. If the parent is in the room, refer to them. Ask them, what would you do? How would you like us to handle this situation? That's a beautiful way to demonstrate to a parent you truly value their opinion and want to work with them. Invest. Invest in the relationship between the child and the parent. Let them know that their child talks about them. They miss them, that they delight in being a part of their family. You can bring a beautiful colored work of art to give to them on a visitation day. You can bring a photograph that you've taken through the week. Maybe you'll even set up a Facebook account that's private just to them, someplace that they have an opportunity to listen and to see how they're doing in the week. They'll get a picture, you'll talk about what's going on in school. These are wonderful ways that we show a family we care. You can bring a snack to a visit. Anything you do that says to this family, I care about your investment in your child, will help do tremendous good. Have you ever been on a trip away from home and you're just worried about what's going on there, and then somebody sends you a text, a cute picture, tells you everything's going fine at home? Does it put your mind at ease? Are you able to go back to work or enjoy your vacation? Can you imagine what this does for a biological family, for the primary family to relax, to go about the business of healing through the hard work of recovering from addiction, or even to help them find a job or continue to work on looking for a place to live? These are some of the important things you can do when you invest. Value. V. How can you demonstrate value? By caring about your job, by understanding the incredible importance of the work that you're doing in helping connect families back to children. This is an emotional, deep connection that they have with their children often. And it will be important for you to demonstrate, I care about that and I value that. And I value my role in the ability to care for your child and help them to connect back to you. Do you understand that families who have visits twice or more a month with their children are better settled in their foster homes? They do better. Children who have visits with their parents have less anxiety and fear and less depression. So we know that this is a truly valuable thing we offer to primary families. E, expression. You're literally going to have weekly interaction with the primary family, probably in the form of family team meetings and other visits. You need to find a way to have very honest and open communication. This means, in a very positive way, you can say up front, these are the days I'm available. I want to see children get to see you. On Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, I have the capacity to do that. Let them know when you're not available so that people know what your schedule needs are also. These are some things that help move us through the system in a more positive way. Expect that there is going to be times of confrontation. It's just part of the system. We're working through so many difficult issues when we're talking about children's needs and about the healing process. But if you come to approach things when you deal with a primary family in a way that says, I need to talk to you about something hard, but I'm here and I care, you demonstrate one of the most primary things we do in a relationship, which says, this is hard stuff and I'm not giving up, but you need to know we need to work on this. This is a good way to build a relationship. These are some of the valuable things that we do that demonstrate we are invested in children, that we care about the relationship they have with their children, and that we have the power to create a relationship and share and express ourselves in ways that say we want to connect with you. Now, last of all, this is going to feel like an exploration. And I mean in the truest sense of the word, you're going to feel like you are moving into uncharted territory. You can expect that you're going to lose your way, that you're going to make steps into the path that you are going to have better ways of handling later on. That's all part of exploration, is to jump in, try something out, make mistakes along the way, and improve as we go. That's the kind of exploration you do when you foster care, when you do foster care work. I'd like to finish with a wonderful quote from Ambrose Redmoon. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. Thank you.
If you ever get a chance to take a class from her, do it. She's lovely. All right. So there'll be some questions on the quiz that relate to what Terry talked about. So, yes, Tom.
What do you do with the homework?
Oh, the homework basket, which is where that box. You stick it in there. So, and if by chance you locked it in your trunk, you're okay. I promise. All right. So this is our second video. This is Christy, and I met Christy, and the funny thing is, so Brian, who's doing our videos here, he did this video I don't know how many years ago, several years ago, he did this video for us. So I met Christy, oh gosh, let's see, so Caden is 18 now, and probably about 14, 15 years ago. I used to teach these classes at the Fred House Academy, which is at the point of the mountain. So I'd get a lot of Utah County folks up there because we were so close to Utah County. And first night of class, we were going around there doing introductions. We did it a little bit differently then. And you have to know that I'm a pretty good stereotyper. So here's Christy, blonde hair. She had it pulled back in a ponytail. She's about 8 months pregnant. And during the introduction, she says that she's from, I think, Orem. So what do I think about her right away? It's okay if you think the same thing I thought. Cute little Mormon girl, just, cute little Mormon girl, young mother. That's just, what I thought. And she was there to become a peer parent. Remember we talked about in class number 3, especially when we talked about that really awful house, we talked about the peer parent program. That's what she was there to do. She was there to work with parents to either get their kids back or to prevent their kids from being taken into foster care. Now, during that first night, someone said something really, really negative about the birth parents with whom we'd all be working. And Christy raised her hand and she said, I wasn't going to say anything, but my son was in foster care and I just got him back 6 months ago. And of course, everybody's, looked at her immediately. And through that was the first night. And so the rest of the month, she shared little pieces, bits and pieces of her story. So I asked her the next month if she'd be willing to come and be a guest speaker. And she came in, and two things floored me immediately. One, she's really an amazing presenter. She has such presence. And second, her story. The fact that this girl's alive, the fact she's not in prison, and as you'll hear, that she got her son back, is all of those things are startling. Now, when she used to come as a guest speaker, you could sit here and listen to her for an hour, no problem. But to listen to someone talk on a screen for an hour is a little bit harder. So I have cut this down to about 30 minutes. So I'm going to get you up to where I'm going to start the video. So she used, like I said, she used to be a guest speaker, but she moved to California several years ago, and we didn't want to lose her story, and that's why we had Brian come and sat her down in my living room and did a film of her story. She was born in Visalia, California. Her biological mother was an alcoholic and drank throughout her pregnancy with Christy. And when she gave birth to Christy, her biological mother, had planned to place her for adoption. But she chose instead to send her home with her grandmother who wanted her. The grandmother said, no, I'll take her. And so Christy's biological mother let her go home with her grandmother. Now, Christy considers herself to having been adopted, but she was actually never legally adopted. And that caused some real problems in that her biological mother could come and take her, and did. So probably the first 5 to 6 years of her life, her mother was in and out of her life a lot, and would take her for a few days, a few weeks. She said the longest she ever had her was, I think it was about 2 months when Christy was 5. And she said it was never good. It was never good when her mother took her. But for all other intents and purposes, she considers her grandmother her mother. When she refers to her mother in this, no, she's actually referring to her grandmother. But she was raised by her grandmother, loving, kind, nurturing family. There's a lot of alcoholism in her family that goes way back. And so Christy was told from when she was very young, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink. So when she was 12 years old, she didn't have a lot of friends, and she was in 6th grade, and another little girl came up to her and said, I brought something from home, do you want to see what it is? And Christy said, sure, and they went off in the corner of the playground, and it turned out to be a thermos full of vodka. And so the girl took a drink, Christy took a drink, the girl took a drink, Christy drank the rest. And she said, I had never felt so good in my life. She said, all these people have been telling me not to drink, and she's like, why? It's fantastic. And talking to Christy through the years I've known her, she probably could have been diagnosed with a real anxiety disorder as a kid. She wasn't just an anxious kid. I think she probably fell into the category of anxiety disorder. She's a very, very anxious kid. And the alcohol was the first time she felt calm. It's the first time she felt okay. So she starts drinking every day for about a year. When she's 13, alcohol was no longer sufficient to give her a sense of escape, and that's when she discovered meth. And if she were here today, she would say meth was my drug of choice, even though she's been clean for so long. She started using meth, and just like alcohol, she was addicted immediately. It's interesting because meth's a really different drug than alcohol. But she was addicted immediately. She starts using meth, not quite as often as the alcohol because it's harder to get, but she starts using, she said probably 3 to 4 times a week she's using, and then she's using anything else she can get a hold of, including continuing use of alcohol. So she goes like this for about 6 months, and she wants to quit, but Christy's really careful about, and you'll probably pick this up a little bit in some of the stuff she says, she's really careful about not blaming anybody for what she did, because she said, I made my decisions, I don't blame anybody. It's one of the reasons she's been able to stay clean all these years. If you press her and you ask her, is there anything that your mother could have done differently? She'll say, well, they would say really horrible things about my mother right in front of me. And other times they would say to me, you look just like your mother. And she does, she looks just like her mom. So she said that she felt like if she went and told her mom she was using, her mom and her sisters would hate her the same way they hated her biological mom. And she said, I couldn't handle that. She said, so she tried to commit suicide. And luckily, she's only 13, so she doesn't know what she's doing, but she bloodies herself up pretty good. Her mom finds her. Visalia is a relatively small community. She takes her to the only mental health facility, which is a facility for adults, not kids. They immediately admit her. She's there for 3 months. No assessment is done. And in that 3 months, she is repeatedly sexually assaulted by adult patients of the facility. So and she said any hope she ever had that her life was going to get better, she lost at that point. And after 3 months, she couldn't take it anymore, so she said, I'm not mentally ill, I'm on drugs. And they finally did an assessment on her and said, oh yeah, and let her out. And there was supposed to be follow-up with some kind of drug treatment, and there never was. So she goes back to using immediately. Now, remembering that her mother is really her grandmother, she's older, and she had some health problems. And Christy was causing her a lot of stress, and she told Christy, if you don't stop using, you're gonna kill me. So you either have to stop using or you have to get out. And Christy said she thought it'd be funny to be homeless in 13. So she leaves home at the end of her 13th year. And she's homeless for probably about 4 years. Well, till Caden's birth, she's homeless for a lot longer than that, but she's homeless as a teenager for about 4 years. 2 years she's homeless. She hooks up with a guy when she's 15. They're homeless, using together a couple more years. She said one day she's sitting in a park where a lot of the kids would hang out. And she's in the park, and she said she had done LSD earlier that day, marijuana, and she was drinking a bottle of vodka. She said even though meth was her drug of choice, she'd do anything. And her mom comes and finds her and says, I have a really strong feeling that you're pregnant. And Christy said, I couldn't possibly be pregnant. I've never even had sex. She's like, yeah, right, come with me. So Christy goes with her mom because she thinks maybe I can steal some money out of her purse. So she goes with her mom to the clinic, gets tested for pregnancy, finds out she's 3 months pregnant. And she's devastated because she swore she would never do to a baby what her mom did to her, which was use while she was pregnant. So as soon as she finds out she's pregnant, she stops everything. All drugs, all alcohol. She says she stops drinking Coca-Cola, she starts eating vegetables, she starts sleeping, she starts, doing everything she can to give her baby the very best chance at a healthy life, start at life. And so I'm going to start the video from Caden's birth, and then she'll tell you what happens from there on out.
And on February 2nd, 1999, I gave birth to a little boy. His name is Caden. He was 8 pounds, 8.5 ounces, and 21 inches long, and he was beautiful. I had never felt love like that before in my entire life, ever. I remember sitting in the hospital bed and holding this baby and looking at him and thinking, I'm gonna give you the world. I'm gonna be the best mom there is, and thinking, you're gonna love me no matter how bad I am. You'll love me. And I was just so happy. It was the greatest high I had ever felt, way better than drugs. It was great, and I was happy for a moment. And of course, that high wears off very quickly. And this may sound very naive, but I didn't realize how hard it was to take care of a baby. I thought babies were these cute little things that you could dress up and say, oh, this is my cute little baby. Look at him, and that's it. I didn't realize they cry all night long, and they need to be fed all the time, and their diapers changed, and it was very frustrating for me, just like it is any new mom. But for me, it was a little bit harder because I had stopped using drugs only because I was pregnant. If I would not have been pregnant, I would have never stopped using. And now, I didn't have this baby inside of me anymore. And I started to justify how I could use drugs. Well, I'm not pregnant anymore. I'm not hurting anyone but myself. And I wanted to run away from life again. I always want to run away. And so 1 week after Caden was born, I started using meth again. And it was just as bad as before, but now there was a baby involved. And I started to neglect and abuse Caden. And back then at the time, I would have stood in front of anyone and said, I'm a great mom. I don't know what you're talking about. I can do drugs and take care of this baby. I was in complete denial that I was not being a good mom. But now looking back on it sober, I realized that what I did to him was I abused him and I neglected him. And I believe that people don't just maliciously go out and neglect their children. You make excuses in your head that make it okay for you to do these things. And so I would make these excuses and I would say, okay, well, I'm gonna make this bottle and I'm gonna stick it in the fridge so it won't go bad. And then I'm gonna run into the bathroom, I'm gonna get high, I'm gonna come back out and I'm gonna feed him. And this all seemed perfectly logical in my head. And pretty soon, the bottle is staying in the fridge longer and longer and longer, and I'm sitting in the bathroom all day long. And then I would say things like, okay, I have this package of 52 newborn diapers here. And I don't have money to be buying diapers all the time, so I'm gonna make these diapers last longer. So I'll leave them on him just a little bit longer than I should, and then I'll change his diaper. But in all reality, his diaper needed to be changed. And then it got to the point where I would be sitting there getting high and I would hear him cry. And I resented him. I felt like he was taking my life away from me. And then it got to the point where I hated Caden. I didn't want to look at him. I didn't want to touch him. I didn't want to have anything to do with him. I just wanted to get high and forget about him. But I am such a selfish person that I was not willing to give anyone else the satisfaction of taking him away from me. So I just kept him in this environment. And still to this day, I have no idea who took care of him, who fed him, who changed his diapers. I just know that I didn't do it. And my family knew that I was on drugs, because when I'm on drugs, I don't talk to them. And they were very worried about me, and they were trying to find Caden and I so they could get Caden away from me. But just like before, I was bouncing from house to house to house. My mom would stay up all night long driving around searching for us. She called the police on us, she called CPS on us, but nothing ever happened. No one could ever find me. And I was just pretty much allowed to neglect my child. And in December of '99, that same year that Caden was born, I was at this house with my husband, and he tried to kill me. And this was not his first attempt. He had me up against a wall and was strangling me. And Caden was in a walker watching the whole thing, and I was kind of going in and out of consciousness. And his friends came over out of the blue and saw what he was doing to me and pulled him off of me. And it was like right at that moment, this light went off in my head, and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I have got to get Caden out of this situation. So I grabbed Caden, grabbed whatever I had, and walked to my mom's house. And my mom was very happy to see that we were alive. And she was not going to do anything to let that baby out of her sight. But my mom knows me pretty well and knew that if she said, I'm calling the police and we're taking this baby, I probably would have beat her up and left or done something crazy. So she came up with another one of her great plans. She really didn't have anyone else there to help her get Caden away from me. So she came up with this plan to get me out to Utah, because I had a sister, two sisters, and a brother who lived here. And their strength in numbers, and they were going to all get together, kind of like an intervention, take Caden away from me, and then ship me back to California. But she knew that if she told me that's what she was doing, I wouldn't go. And so she asked me if I would go. It was around Christmas time, and she said, Christy, let's go to Utah. Let's take a nice Christmas vacation. You can get away from everything, think about what's going on. You can see your family, they want to see you, and everyone wants to be around you, and you can just take a break. And my first reaction was, no, I am not going there. And I didn't tell her this, but I didn't want to go to Utah because I believed that drugs did not exist there, that nothing bad ever happened there. There was no crime, nothing, that Utah was this kind of like this heaven on earth. And I thought, I don't belong there, I'm not going. And so somehow she convinced me to come out here. And when I got here, I didn't see drugs and I didn't see bad things because I wasn't looking for them. And I saw this gorgeous state with these beautiful mountains and snow. I had never seen snow before, and it was beautiful, and I thought, Utah is going to save me. And I can come here to Utah, and I can leave that Christy in California, and I can start all over, and no one will ever have to know what I've done. And I can be a good mom. And my family is very religious, like I said in the beginning of my story. And I'm going to say my religion, and I hope that it doesn't offend, but it's just a part of my story, and if I didn't say it, I'm sure you would figure it out anyway. But my family is LDS. And their solution for me was that if we just find Christy a nice return missionary and get her married in the temple, she'll be fine, and all these problems will just disappear. And so it just so happened that my sister had this construction company, and they had this poor, unsuspecting missionary boy waiting for me to go out with. And they didn't care that I was still married. They thought, hey, if we just find Christy a good guy, things will be okay. And so I went out on a date with this guy, and I had never been on a date before in my entire life. And he took me out to dinner, and I don't even remember what else we did. But what I do remember is he didn't hit me, and he didn't call me stupid, and he didn't say, hey, let me take you over here and get you drunk or high. And he told me I was pretty. And no one had ever told me I was pretty besides my mom. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're right. I'm gonna marry this guy and everything's gonna be fine. And I'm thinking this on the first date, so of course this poor guy has no clue what's going on. And Utah, and thinking that Utah was this perfect place, was enough to make me go home to California, file for a divorce, pack all of my things, and move here. And when I got here, this guy didn't stick around and wait for me. I don't know why. And Christy followed me here. All those problems followed me here. And pretty soon I started to see bad things happening and crime, and pretty soon I found drugs. And I was back on drugs. And when I'm on drugs, I feel like I deserve abuse or something, because I moved my ex-husband from California to Utah, and the cycle started all over again. And my family heard about what was going on with me, pretty much because I wasn't keeping in contact, and they called DCFS on me. And that was the best thing they could have ever done for Caden and I. What's different about Utah is that they have a system here for the children, and they love them, and they take care of them, and they will protect them. And that's what they did. And they came to my house. They found me really quick and came and took Caden away from me. And that was the best thing that ever happened to him. When Caden was first taken away from me, he was placed with my sister. And when my sister got Caden, he was so severely malnutritioned that if he would have even stayed with me a couple of days longer, maybe he would have died. And that was very difficult for me. I knew I wasn't a good person. I knew I wasn't the greatest mom. But I knew now that I was so selfish that I was willing to kill my own child for my happiness. And that's a very difficult thing to look at in yourself. And it's very, very hard to live with. And believe me, I did not want to live with myself. So I was on a mission to commit suicide again. And this time I was serious, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. And I knew it would work because a lot of my friends have passed away because of this, but I was going to overdose. And I overdosed 3 times. And I kept waking up, and every time I woke up in that hospital, I was so mad that I was awake and alive. And I would leave that hospital, and I would go right back out there and do it again. And I became homeless again. Now I was of the age where I could start going in and out of jail. I was going in and out of jail all the time. I was doing forgeries. I was doing anything I could to make money. And it got to the point where it was so bad, my ex-husband didn't even want to stick around and beat me up anymore. He left me. I had just lost it. I had completely lost it. All I wanted to do was die. And on January 5th, 2001, I was at a house and I was doing a drug deal to make a little bit of money to go get some meth. And I ended up getting jumped by 3 guys and a girl. And they beat me in my head with a croquet mallet and stomped on my head. And I remember being curled up in a little ball on the floor and feeling all these things hitting me in the head. And I saw someone's feet step back and they yelled, "Stop." And I stood up and my front tooth had come out of my top lip and I had blood just gushing out of my head. And I grabbed my backpack and I left there and I started walking down the street. And a guy pulled over and asked me if I needed help, and I said yes, and I got into his car. Now I have to tell you, I was a very obvious drug user. I weighed maybe 80, 90 to 100 pounds. It fluctuated depending on eating and sleeping. I had sores all over my entire face, big, huge sores all over my face, all over my arms. I was dirty. I never took a shower. I never brushed my teeth, and I just acted weird. If you knew nothing about drugs, you could look at me and say, "There's drugs." And so when you're on drugs, for some reason, you know just by looking at a person who does and does not use drugs. You can just see it in them. And I could tell that this guy used drugs, and he could tell that I used drugs. And he asked me what had happened to me. And I told him, and he asked me if I wanted to go get high. And I said yes. And I went to a hotel room with him and started doing more meth. And I remember sitting on this bed in this hotel room and having this overwhelming feeling to stand up. And it was just so overwhelming and powerful that I just stood up. And right in front of me was this big, huge hotel mirror. And there I was. And I had nowhere else to look but at my face. And I was scared to death by the person I saw in that mirror. Not only did I look like a monster, but I can tell you I probably hadn't looked in a mirror since I was about 12 years old. That's how much I hated myself. I hated my face. I hated everything about me. And it scared me, and I did look like a monster. My front tooth was still hanging out of my top lip. I didn't even bother to try and fix my mouth before I started getting high. I had these huge cuts in my mouth that became huge and swollen and infected from the drugs. I had lumps all over my head from getting beat in the head, and I had dried blood all over me, all over my face, my clothes, my arms and hands. I didn't even wash myself off before I started getting high. And I sat there staring at myself in the mirror, and at that moment I knew if I sat back down on that bed, I was gonna die. I just knew it. I knew I did not have anything left in me. And so for the first time in my life, I thought, oh my gosh, I don't wanna die. And that was it for me. That was my bottom. That was my low. It's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It's not even close to the worst thing that's ever happened to me. But that's what it took for me to either make a change or die. And so I left that hotel room and I checked myself into rehab, and I have been sober ever since. But life has been so much harder off of drugs than it was when I was on them, because I had to deal with life, the thing I ran away from. And boy, I created a mess of my life. Still to this day, I am dealing with the mess I created. And I had to deal with the loss of my son all over again, sober. And that was very difficult. And when I first went into this treatment center, I had to detox. And it was a very bad detox. My body had been used to using drugs for a very long time. And so it was horrible, and I was just kind of out of it. And once I started to kind of get some thoughts back into my head, I realized, oh my gosh, where's Caden? I had forgot what had happened to him. And I'm looking around, looking at everyone, and I just start screaming at everyone in the treatment center. Where's my son? And you took him from me, and you better give him back to me now. And they had no clue that I had even had a child until I started ranting and raving about it. See, I may have wanted to get sober, but I wasn't very nice and happy. And so They were like, man, we are not helping this girl get her kid back. And my family, they had heard this song and dance before. How many times did I tell them I was going to get sober? And they were not willing to help me. I burned all of my bridges. I had no one. No one wanted to help me get Caden back, and I just wanted to see him. And I heard about this place called DCFS Drug Court, and I heard that they would help you get your kids back. And so I enrolled myself in drug court, and there was a caseworker and a judge who saw something in me that no one's ever seen in me before in my entire life. I was the mess up of my family, even more so than my birth mother. I was the one who would never amount to anything. I was the one that should be dead. And that was made very clear to me, and they saw something different. And that helped me. And maybe I needed it from an outside point of view, maybe not from my family, maybe I needed it from someone else. But that's when I started to become more willing and less angry. And they told me that they would help me get Caden back, but I needed to do some things first. And by this point, I was willing to do anything they said. And I graduated the 30-day treatment program, and I was to start doing intensive treatment during the day, but you don't live there, and I was going to be living in a women's homeless shelter. And on my way to day treatment, my first day, I was driving with another client from day treatment, and they got pulled over by the police. And the police ran my name, and I had 8 felony warrants. And I went back to jail. And this judge was definitely sick and tired of seeing me and sentenced me on 8 0-5s in the Utah State Prison, back to back. So I'd have to serve one, then the other, then the other, then the other. And for some reason at the time, the prison was full, and there wasn't a bed for me to go up to. And so they transported me from Utah County Jail to Salt Lake County Jail to wait out my time. And this caseworker and this judge were desperately trying to get me another chance, writing letters, you know, doing anything they could to try and get me another chance. And they got me a court date, and this normally doesn't happen after you're sentenced. And they got me this court date, and they took me up in front of the judge, and I had this caseworker standing next to me, and he kind of pled my case to the judge and said, listen, Judge, you know, if Christy goes to prison, rights will be terminated. She'll never see her son again. She's been sober for 30 days. She's in our drug court, and we believe she can do it. And at first, I didn't think the judge was listening to me because he was shuffling through some paperwork. And after the caseworker was done talking, he looked right up at me and looked me in the eyes and said, you should have thought about these things before you did all this, and sent me back to jail. And so I thought, there is just no way. And while all this is going on and I'm sitting in jail, my sister, who had Caden, also has 7 other children, very small young children, and was having a very difficult time giving Caden the attention he needed. And honestly, I believe that she didn't want Caden to grow up knowing his mother was in prison. And so she decided the best thing for Caden would be to put him into a foster home. And when this foster family got Caden, they were very happy to have him because they were going to get to adopt because I was going to prison. And they were actually so much better for him. When he went into that home, he just progressed in so many ways and became so much better. And they were wonderful for him. They were his new mom and dad. And while that's going on and I'm sitting in prison or in jail, my caseworker got me another court date. And I went back up there kind of with no hopes that anything would happen. And he pretty much said the same thing as he did before, you know, if Christy goes, rights will be terminated, and, you know, we think she can do this, we really believe she can do this. And I've never heard of this happening before, but the judge must have had some sort of soft heart that day and listened. And he actually took my felony record and struck it off. And that means that you could go look up my name and I would have no felonies. And he said, okay, I will give you one more chance. And he gave me a whole new sentence, and they were all misdemeanors. And he gave me 6 months in jail, 6 months in the House of Hope, which is a treatment center for women and children in Salt Lake, and 5 years adult probation and parole. And you normally get 3, but he gave me 5 because he thought I was going to mess up. And if I did mess up, my sentence would have been even worse. And so I did my 6 months in jail, and that was one of the best things that's ever happened to me. 6 months in jail is a very long time. Out here, it just flies by so quickly, but in there, it feels like 6 years. And all I had to do in there was sit and think about what I had done. And for the first time ever, I stopped blaming everyone else for my drug problem. I stopped blaming my birth mom. I stopped blaming my mom. I stopped blaming that I didn't have a father. I would have blamed the mailman if I could. I stopped blaming everyone. And I took responsibility for my own actions and said, okay, this is what I've done, and what am I going to do to make it different? And I believe that that helped me, and I needed that. And I got out of jail, and this is where the story gets even more difficult. I want you to know that I am not here to make this foster family look or sound like bad people at all whatsoever. I love them from the bottom of my heart. There is a special place for them. And as you can imagine, it was very difficult for all of us. It was difficult for them. It was difficult for me. And they naturally were very upset. They were going to get to adopt Caden. All of a sudden, I'm out of jail, and we're going to have reunification. And all they knew about me is all that stuff I just told you. You know, and I don't blame them for not liking me. I didn't like myself then either. I wasn't a good parent then. And they didn't want me to hurt Caden. And that, to me, means something because they loved him that much. But this was hard. I wanted to see Caden. I wanted to see him, and I wanted him back. And I was in Salt Lake at my treatment center, and they were in Utah County, and they didn't want to come up for visits. They didn't want to have anything to do with me. And I don't blame them for that. But I couldn't just leave the treatment center whenever I felt like it and go have visits in Utah County. So I got 2 visits with Caden before I was to make my final decision. And before I had these visits, I had every intention of getting Caden back. Caden was my son. I gave birth to him. I'm getting him back. And then I had the visit. And they were in this hotel room with this caseworker, and Caden walked in, and I had never seen him walk. And he took one look at me and started to cry and ask for his mommy, and he was not talking to me. And that hurt. That made me stop thinking about me for once. I realized that I needed to do what was going to be best for Caden, and was I really the best thing for Caden? I didn't know. You know, here he had a mom and a dad, and I'm sitting in treatment. And so I didn't just jump right to a decision. I took a long time, and I thought, and I weighed out all the pros and the cons, and everything that seemed right and good was with this foster family. There was a mom and a dad, and they had a house and a car and jobs and a dog. And here I was in rehab. If I wouldn't have been in rehab, I would have been homeless. I had no education. When I dropped out of school in the 7th grade, I never went back. Still to this day, I have a 7th grade education. I had no job history or any way to provide for him. It just didn't seem like I was the right thing for him. And I just didn't know what to do. I would ask people, and people would tell me one thing, and then people would tell me another thing, and nothing just seemed to make sense. And I did, during this process, have this little feeling. And I based my decision on this feeling that I had, and I got Caden back. Caden is my son. I gave birth to him. I know more than anyone on the face of this earth what I have done to him. And I have to live with myself every day for it. And that's something that I'm willing to do to have him be a part of my life. I honestly believe in our situation, this was the best thing for Caden and I. I'm not strong enough to turn my back and live my life and always wonder where my child was. I couldn't do it. And I believe my life would definitely be different without him, and his would be different without me. And so, of course, this was very hard for the foster family. I can't even imagine. I have no idea what they must have went through. They just decided to cut all ties. And so Caden came up from Utah County to Salt Lake to live with me, with the caseworker, and none of his things. And when Caden first got there, it was very difficult. It was extremely difficult for him, and I kind of wondered, did I do the right thing here, you know? Because all he did at first was just cry and cry and cry and cry and cry. But luckily, in this treatment center, they had options for us, and they had a system for us to help us become closer. And they taught me so many things. They taught me how to brush my teeth again. I had forgotten how to brush my teeth, how to take a shower, how to cook food, how to budget, how to shop for groceries. But the greatest gift they ever gave me was they taught me how to bond with my son. And once I built that bond and I sat down and played with him on the floor and built this bond with him, he started to call me mommy. And he had 2 moms, and it was great. I was happy with that because I was his mom again. And things just kept getting better and better from there. I graduated the House of Hope. By this point, I had been sober for a year, and my family finally seeing me do something different with my life was right there to back me up 100% and help me and be there for us. So I moved back down to Utah County to be closer to my sisters. And at first, it wasn't the greatest. I lived in this basement apartment in Springville, and I was on welfare, and I didn't have a car or a job because I was doing a lot of treatment still and drug court and probation. So I didn't have too much going on for me, but I had a lot going on for me. And I had kind of a fallback. In treatment, I learned what made me want to use drugs, the tools to stay off of them, and how to pretty much live my life without drugs. I never worked on my relationship with men. And I ended up getting pregnant, and I have a 5-year-old daughter, and her name is Aspen, and her father's never been involved in the picture at all whatsoever. But when I got pregnant with Aspen, I decided I wanted to be a better mother. And I wanted to not stay stuck. I don't like staying stuck. I want to continually grow. And so I took myself off of welfare. I got 2 and 3 jobs to support my kids. I graduated drug court. I got off probation in 2 years and not 5. My sisters let me babysit their kids. They didn't run and lock the door when I came over and turn out the lights anymore. And people started to trust me. And I got a house, I got a car, and I started paying bills, and I got a life. And when I got that life, I met my husband, and he's not the father of Caden or Aspen, but he is that father that I always wanted. We have a 3-year-old daughter, and her name is Madigan, and he loves those 2 kids just as much as he loves his own daughter. And he loves me. He does not nearly have the background that I do, but he loves me. And sometimes it's not easy, and life isn't easy all the time. And sometimes, you know, I have my down moments, and I don't want to sit here and say that I'm perfect now, because I'm not. I struggle still. I struggle, and it's hard, but anything's better than that life that I lived. And I'm just like everyone else. I live in Taylorsville. There's a lot of people who know me who have no idea that I've ever even done anything like this. And I'm very grateful for all the foster families out there. I'm very grateful for them. I appreciate them very much. And I know it must be hard for them, and I'm very grateful for them. And if there's any advice I could give anyone, it would be to let children know who their parents are. I believe just in human nature, we have this urge to want to know where we come from. And I still to this day have no clue who my father is. And there's a hole in my heart that's missing. And no one will ever be able to fill that for me. And I believe that if people can just fill that void for children, things might be a little different.
I'm going to pass around a current picture. She and I are friends on Facebook, and I looked for the most current picture I could find, and it was at the Pride Festival this last, I guess, a couple weekends ago. Now, Caden's in the back, so you really can't see him really well, but he's 18 now, and you can kind of see he's grown up. And then that's Madigan, who was the girl that she was pregnant with when I met her. And then Aspen's the older one. Madigan's the younger one, so Aspen's the one. Okay, what stood out for you in Christy's story? It's amazing she's alive and not in prison. Yeah, and she, like when she used to come live, she used to talk more about some of the stuff that happened to her when she's living on the streets, those 4 years in Visalia. The fact she's alive is amazing. The fact that she lived through that, and she has, and she considers that for herself too, because she has a lot of friends that died. What else stood out for you? Yes. Remind me of your name. Rebecca.
I thought it was really sad that the parents were so consumed with grief that they just cut off ties with her son.
Yeah.
And he thought those were his parents, just to cut off those ties, and it was hard for him. That was kind of
Yeah.
really rough.
Yeah. Of all of her story, this is the part I struggle with the most. Now, Christy, I think she says this on the video, I'm not here to make them look bad, and she's not. She recognizes that they were acting out of grief, like Rebecca said. Now, I want to tell you a little context, and I actually know a caseworker who was one of the caseworkers who was involved with this case, so I know this for sure. What do you think that family was told when they got Caden? Caden was 2 years old. He'd already been in foster care for 6 months. This was the time, the law was still 8 months to permanency at that point, so the clock is ticking loudly. She has just been sentenced to 8-0 to 5 back-to-back Utah State Prison. What is this foster family told when they get Caden? Yeah, this is a slam dunk adoption. This is your baby. And it was probably the best thing in the world for Caden, because this family fully psychologically and emotionally adopted him. There was no arm's length, there was no uncertainty, there was none of that stuff that shows up sometimes. They were on board 100%, which is exactly what Caden needed. A few months in, all of a sudden they're being told exactly the opposite. And all they know about Christy is all that crap. Meth addict, homeless since she was 13, meth addiction since she was 13. Only at this point she's only had maybe 6 weeks of sobriety. She's homeless still. You're going to give our baby, you're going to give this innocent little boy back to her? How is that okay? Now, I understand why they did what they did. I still find it heartbreaking that they did what they did. Because who did they make it harder for? Caden. Who else did they make it harder for? Themselves. Yeah, Christy for sure, but themselves. And that's one thing I always think about. I think one thing that breaks my heart the most about this is that they lost Caden for good, and they didn't have to. That Christy, like a lot of biological families, would have allowed continued contact if there had been a civil, kind relationship there. And they could have been, to this day, they could be involved in Caden's life. But they're not. Because that grief overwhelmed their ability to see a different path. So I don't want to diminish the grief, because they lost their son. And yet I do want to recognize that inability to put that grief on the back burner just for a little while and do what needed to be done for Caden's sake actually probably robbed them all of what could have been, I think, a wonderful relationship long term. So going back to what, I can't remember, one of you said, who was it, Wendy? Or someone who was sitting over here. Was that night you guys kept moving around? You wouldn't stay in your seats. But someone said, I think it was Nicole, who said last time, she said, the heartbreak that kids are going to face not only coming into care, but when they go back home again, because they lose both directions. let's try to reduce that loss for them by trying to be involved, even if we struggle with what the outcome of the case might be. What else stood out for you? Wendy?
She had a 7th grade education.
Yeah.
Was homeless and a drug addict for a huge
Yeah.
majority
Yeah.
of her life up to the
Yeah.
point that she made that video. And she was very thoughtful and well spoken by the time she recorded the video.
Mhm.
And it is really clear that she worked hard on making herself who she is. And that really struck me because I wouldn't have expected that.
Yeah. Because when you hear, if you just saw those things on a piece of paper, yeah, you wouldn't. And one thing Christy used to say, because so that first night I asked her to come and speak, she came and spoke every single month for 7 years. So she told that story a lot. And I watched her, I listened to her, and the facts of her story never changed. I can pick up on discrepancies pretty quickly, and her story was very consistent. What changed was her insight into her own story and her insight into herself and the other people involved. And I'd listen to her and I'd realize that, oh, she's kind of figured something out, because she'd talk about one thing more, or she'd talk about an insight she had or something. So she spent, and I'm not saying this at all like, no credit to me, it was just the situation it turned out to be. But I really believe one of the things that kept her clean was the fact that every single month she had to come and be accountable and remind herself of her own story. But she has worked really hard, and she still works really hard today. She's back in Salt Lake, and she's one of the hardest working, like literally hardest working people I've ever met, as well as somebody, when she says, I don't like to say stuck, that is true for her. She's constantly trying to find new ways to grow and learn in her life. She really is a remarkable person. What else? I forgot to say this part. So she used to actually also go up to Ogden and present for Brian up there. And she, one time, she went up there and she looked like that, you know. And so a guy told Brian and Christy, he said, I don't believe you. I think they hired you. You're like an actress. They hired you to do this. There's no way. So Christy, that was hilarious. So she started bringing booking photos of herself. And you know when you see on the news, like you're watching the 10 o'clock news tonight, and you're going to see the booking photo of this couple that's been arrested for, you know, heroin distribution or stealing people's storage units or whatever. And you see these booking photos, and you look at them and you think, ew, that's what Christy looked like. And she said also, and I'm glad William brought this up, she says, I didn't sound like that, I didn't look like that, like this today, when I first got clean and when I was getting Caden back. She said, I looked pretty scary, I looked pretty bad. And she said, and I was mad, and I wasn't. She's got a mouth on her. She's pretty careful here, but I've heard her. I've known her for a long time. So know when you see these birth parents that they're probably not going to be as poised as that, because it took her a long time to get here. And she recognizes where she was and where she is now. But to see the potential, to see the humanity in every single one of them, even when you struggle with them. What else stood out for you? Yeah.
I just have a question. Is it common to return the children to the parent if they're in rehab?
Yes.
That was interesting.
Yes. So there's House of Hope and there's Odyssey House, both of which are parent and children programs. And so you can have a parent, and they have to make a certain amount of progress. And therapists and caseworkers and judges all have to sign off on it. But part of the reason why is because that's a supportive environment for both the parent and the child. It's not ideal, but we'd rather reunite a child there than wait till they get out of that setting and reunite them. Because being a parent is hard, and being a parent without any kind of support when you're just struggling to stay clean is incredibly difficult. So if we can reunite them while they're still in a supportive, safe environment, it helps to reestablish that bond, help with some of the parenting skills, so that by the time they are discharged with the child, they are on a firmer foundation. And that's going to be hard for you guys. When you're licensed and approved for placement, we'll get you all on our secret Facebook group. And it literally is secret. It's like a secret group. And we'll get you on there. And you will see one of the biggest struggles that parents have is reuniting a child back to a drug rehab program. I mean, you're not doing it to the program, you're doing it to the parent, but the parent's in the program. And a lot of parents really struggle with that because they don't think it's best for the kid. And it may not be ideal, it probably isn't ideal, and yet it probably is better than if we waited for the parent to get all the way through that program and then get their kid back. First, we're increasing the length of time they're separated from each other, but we're also, I think, setting the parent up for failure because they don't have that support that they need. So it's not ideal. It's not ideal, but it's probably one of the better things and it works. We've been doing it for a long, long time. We did it when Christy got Caden back. That was 15 years ago, and we're still doing it today because there's legitimate research to back it up and numbers to back it up, which isn't going to help you when it's your kid that you're letting go to that kind of situation. What else stood out for you? Yes?
You said
Scott.
you met her in class.
Mm-hmm.
Did she eventually foster?
No, so she came through to be a peer parent, so to work with parents to get their kids back. And it was so funny. She's so funny. So you would think she'd be incredibly compassionate. She's not. She is like, get your act together, and it really frustrated her because she could tell when they were lying because she knows it. I mean, she knows the addict life. She could tell when they were lying. She could tell when they were excuse making. She could tell when they were, and she didn't give them any space at all for that. And so it really frustrated her. So I think she did it for a little while. Maybe a year or two, but she didn't do it long term because it really frustrated her. And it's funny now, like I said, we're friends on Facebook, and every once in a while she'll post a story about parents who don't take care of their kids. She's like, can you believe parents? They're terrible. She's so far past that in her life now. She forgets because her life is so not that anymore. So yeah, so she did. But she did, and every once in a while she would, like, she wanted to do social work for a long time. But this goes back to kind of what Wendy said. Even though she's really incredibly articulate, and she said part of the reason why she is that she read. Like you guys know the term tweaking. So when someone's on a meth high, they will just like obsessively do something. And hers was reading and writing. And so one of the reasons I think she's so well spoken is she did a lot of that. But she really struggles with procedural information. And so like information that follows one thing that follows another thing that follows another thing that follows another thing. And so she's wanted to go back to school, but both probably due to some early stuff because of her mother's drug or alcohol use probably, and then also her early and prolonged drug use. She has some problems with learning and retention of information. And she's not dumb at all. It's just her ability to learn information in a certain way is really difficult, kind of the way you do in school. And so for a long time, she wanted to go back, but I think she's kind of, at least right now, she's not something she's pursuing in her life. Not that kind of work. Different work, but good work. All work is good work. What else stood out for you? Camille. Now, is it super hot now? Like it was super cold and now it's super hot. Yeah.
And I'm never hot.
Yeah. So you're like, so if it's hot, then it's hot. Yeah. So can I ask somebody to check the air conditioning again and maybe turn it back down again? Sorry, I'm just going to send somebody to keep doing that air conditioning. Turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down. Okay.
So it's interesting what the judge told her, like, well, you should have thought about that, which I guess it's easy to say now, but like at 13, she's still a baby, so that's when
Yeah.
she's been thinking about it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one thing I always want to point out to people is, yes, Christy's responsible for what she did, and she will say that, and she says, I would have blamed the mailman. I mean, the reason she's clean today is because she took accountability, and yet when I look at the context of her story, I realize that she started making really bad decisions when she was 12 years old, and probably with some mental health issues on top of that too, plus whatever issues because of her mother's drug and alcohol use. So this path she started on when she was 12. And that doesn't make the harm that she caused any less real, and she recognizes that. And yet I give her a lot of grace because, she was an addict before she knew.
People took advantage of
Yeah.
the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the stuff, like I said, if she were here and she talked more about some of the stuff that happened to her when she was a teenager, pretty horrific stuff, really horrific stuff. The fact that she's doing as well as she's doing is amazing. Anything else, Jared?
This may be terrible to say, but I'm certain you could give us the horror stories just as well too, about the times that parents went back and it was terrible for the kids.
Guess what percentage of kids who go home come back into foster care?
4%?
Yeah. So I know a couple of horror stories. They're few and far between. Most stories are more like this. Now, I guarantee you that she didn't raise Caden the way that that family would have raised him. And they may look at the way that Caden's been raised and think, oh my gosh, it's terrible. But we can look at any other parents and look at them and think, oh my gosh, I've never raised my kid like that. You know, there's a level of
My own kid and say that.
yeah, exactly. Like, I never thought I would say that or do that. Yeah, that, you know, and she certainly struggled. You know, parenting is hard, and there are times she really struggled. Like I said, I met her. She had Caden back for 6 months when I met her, and I've known her the whole time since, and she struggled. You know, but she is probably more typical of most parents who get their kids back.
So more positive than the.
Yeah, I would say more positive than not. Yeah, DCFS is careful about reunifying. Courts are careful about reunifying. You never know what's going to happen. I could tell you horror stories about kids who've been adopted. You know, so we would love that crystal ball. My boss for years has always said, "Oh, if we only had a crystal ball, if we had a crystal ball," because to make a decision for a kid and say this is the best thing for you, and then have something horrible happen, or even just not great happen, it's heartbreaking. But I would say most of the time, it works out okay. Maybe not perfect, maybe not beautifully every time, but okay. What else stood out for you? Yeah, Wendy.
The other thing that really stuck with me through the whole thing was that her family repeatedly tried to force her to come clean and to take better care of her son. And it didn't work, and it didn't work. And then all she had to do was see herself and hit that point where she made her own decision in a moment of clarity, and after that everything was fine. And I think that the way I process that is that you just can't force it.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, there's research that says you can.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And there's research that says you can't. So it's because it's human nature. Yeah, so much for research, exactly. Yeah, and this is actually an interesting conversation because for a long time the belief was someone had to hit bottom before they would, you know, and that's kind of Christy's story demonstrates. And yet there is research that shows if you can get someone into rehab, even if it's against their will, if they can be in there long enough, they still have to have an epiphany of their own, and they still have to make the decision on their own at some point. But that if you can get them to that place, and that's why jail for a lot of people is a good thing, because sometimes it can get them there, but it's not voluntary. But they still have to. But I think it's kind of a hybrid that you can get someone to a place where hopefully they can make a good choice, because they're not making a good choice while they're still using. So, but I think that this story is pretty common for a lot of addicts, that they'll talk about their bottom. Yeah. And when she says it's not the worst thing that's ever happened to me, it's true. I mean, as horrible as that was, that is not the worst thing that's ever happened to her. She could tell you stories. So when people always say, like, I remember a couple years ago there was a story in KSL. There was a little girl, like a 4-year-old girl, who'd been locked out of her house in the middle of winter up in Ogden, and they went in and all the adults, I don't know if you guys remember the story, and all the adults were like passed out from alcohol and drug use. And I was reading some of the comments, which you should never do if you want to maintain your faith in humanity. Everybody thought when it was on Facebook it'd be better because people would be their real names. I'm like, no, they don't care. They're just horrible people and they don't care who knows it. But they write horrible things and that. But one thing I remember seeing a lot was people would say, oh, they're choosing partying over their kid. They'd rather have a good time and take care of their kid. And you know, anyone's ever lived the drug lifestyle? It is not a party. It is a brutal, life-threatening, horrible existence. These people are not having a good time. They're not enjoying it. They're not choosing something better, or in their mind better, over their kid. Addiction, anything that overrides maternal instinct is powerful. And addiction can do that. It's incredibly powerful. And when everyone was yelling about Ebola a couple years ago, I remember thinking, my gosh, the plague is here and it's been here for years and it's addiction. The plague is already here. What else stood out for you?
Just kind of her call at the end to let the foster children know their family. So I had an opportunity to adopt through this program, and we're currently weighing out how to approach the bio family.
Okay, yeah.
Her mother isn't in recovery and is unknown, but her father has one of her other children.
Okay, yeah. So sometimes, and this is I think a great point, sometimes it's not always the parents, sometimes it's a grandparent, sometimes it's an aunt, sometimes it's an uncle. But any connections we can maintain for kids, the research here is pretty clear that kids tend to do better if those relationships are safe and healthy. Absolutely. One thing I want to stress a little bit is, so was anybody here last month for class number 6 and saw Susie? So you guys saw Susie last month. So this is Susie Ramos, who is one of my all-time favorite foster parents. I love this woman. Her kids are a lot bigger now. But I just want to tell you real quick this story about this little boy, Aiden. So Aiden is now 12. He just turned 12. So she had a story really similar to Christy's. The birth mom in that case is named Nicole. And Nicole had a long history of drug use, meth mostly. And she lost Aiden. In fact, she was in a rehab program when she lost Aiden. She was there with Aiden, but she flunked out of the program. And so they took Aiden away from her. And he was about, I don't remember how old he was now, probably about 1.5 years when he was placed with Susie. And a really difficult little guy. He's grown into, he's doing great now. He's seriously the cutest thing you've ever seen. But huge difference in this case was that Susie got to know Nicole. Susie worked with Nicole. Susie, and you don't have to do any of these things. Susie did these all voluntarily, but she would pick Nicole up and take her to visits with Aiden. She would take Nicole to her drug, the UAs, the urine analysis, to see if she's been using. She would take Nicole to job interviews because Nicole didn't have a car. And she got to know Nicole really well. And Nicole worked hard, and she did everything she needed to do in about 6 months to get Aiden back. And the Ramos family, by this point, had really fallen in love with this little guy, but they'd fallen in love with Nicole too. And they were really excited that she'd done the work to get him back. They were sad to lose him, and yet they were excited that she did the work to get him back. So Nicole called Susie the morning the court hearing was scheduled for, where custody was going to be, temporary custody was going to be granted back to Nicole. And she said, I want you to know that when I go into court today, I'm going to ask the judge to terminate my rights. And I want you guys to adopt Aiden. And Susie said, what? And she said, you worked so hard. She said, I know. She said, well, I'm not there yet. I'm not ready yet. I can't drag him along the rest of the journey I need to still make. So I don't want to do that to him. And I know if he stays with you, I know he's loved, because I've seen it myself, and I know that I will still have a relationship with him, even if you adopt him. And so they went into court, and Susie was prepared for it, and she told the judge, and the judge was astonished, and he wouldn't let her do it. And he said, no, and Nicole was so mad, because it took all of her courage to do it once, and he said, you come back in 30 days, you tell me the same thing. And she was so mad, but she came back in 30 days, and she told him the same thing. And Aiden ended up being adopted by the Ramos family. And Nicole's still in his life. When she still lived in Salt Lake, she's in Wyoming now, but when she still lived in Salt Lake, they don't lock, I don't know why you don't lock your doors. I lock my doors all the time. Apparently they don't lock their doors. Because Nicole, she would just like walk in their house, and hey, I'm here, and Aiden would come and see her, and and that, and they're friends on Facebook, and when Susie comes and presents in class, she has this really fantastic Facebook she posts of Nicole commenting on some event that Susie posted on Facebook that Aiden had got to go to, and how grateful Nicole was to the Ramos family for adopting him and still letting her have a relationship with him. So this was the decision that Christy had to make. Get your son back or never see him again. Nicole's decision was get your son back or let a family you know loves him and loves you adopt him and know you'll still be in his life. Big difference. Now, I'm not saying be nice to the biological family so they'll let you adopt their kid. That's not the moral of the story. What I'm saying is there's a third way. This isn't a zero-sum game. It's not winners or losers. In fact, if anybody loses in that kind of situation, it's the kids. So, and that's the Ross cops who are going to be here at 7:30. That's their whole presentation. It's regardless of the outcome of the case, and they'll talk about, they've had some adoptions and they've had some reunifications, and they'll talk about regardless of the outcome of the case, work hard to forge a relationship with any of the biological family you can. And sometimes that's going to mean just you and them have a relationship and not the kids because they're not ready yet. Or sometimes it's going to be a peripheral family member. Sometimes it's just going to be emails or letters. But try to keep as many people as you can in these kids' lives, because kids do better if we can all work together and all work on the same team for them and for their well-being. All right, go take a break. So the Roscofts will be here about 7:30, so you have a little bit longer break. And I've just got like corn nuts and, oh yeah, and the releases, if you'll just stick the releases up here on the front table, that's great. I've just got some corn nuts and Cassandra brought some candies. I'm thinking she must have brought them. And, oh, cookies. So there's a vegetable tray. Just eat what you want. Whatever you find in the kitchen, you can eat it. Thank you.
We are Jennifer and David Roscoff, and Liz has asked us to come present on working with the biological family members. So about us, we've been licensed since 2009. We have we're actually on our 4th placement. We need to update this thing. We're actually on our 4th placement, and we've adopted 4 of the children that we have had, which was 2 different placements. And then we also manage relationships with, it was 11 when we made this, but now I think we're up to like 15 or something with our new placement, biological family members. So just a little bit about, and because this new placement is only like a month old, this is going to be like, this presentation needs to be updated. So 3 cases right now. We'll talk about the other placement at the very end. But 3 cases, we've got Alex. He was our oldest, our first and is our oldest. He was placed with us when he was 9 years old. And then we've got Jeremy, Summer, and Brad, a sibling group, who were placed with us when he was 2, 5, and almost 7. And then we had Kara and Gary, who were placed with us when she was 6 and he was almost 2. So some things to look for as I'm presenting is, 1, look at the boundaries that we set with the different biological family members, because they're all very different based on the child and based on who the parents and other family members are. Also look at how empathy improves the relationships that we have with the biological family members, and also the role that extended family members play in the lives of our children today. So starting off with Alex, like I said, he was 9 when he was placed with us. Early on, when he was first placed with us, the goal in court was adoption. And so we sort of anticipated that we would be adopting him, within 6-7 months, and it ended up being 13 months. So things never go the way you're going to think they are, even if the goal is already adoption. His mom did voluntarily relinquish her rights pretty early on in the case. But some of the things I remember about this time before she relinquished her rights is that she was really concerned about who we were, who was her son living with, and also that her son was going to stay somewhere, that he wasn't going to bounce throughout the whole foster care system. Those are some of her concerns. And I remember that when we met her in court, our first time meeting her was not in court, but we went to all the court cases that we were able to, maybe all of them, I don't remember. But at the hearing where she was going to relinquish her rights, she asked to speak to me, and she wanted to know that we were planning on adopting him. That was something she wanted for him, and just wanted to know that that was our intention. And also she was really concerned that she wanted to be part of his life still, and she was in a place in her life where we felt that was probably going to be okay. She just knew she wasn't really going to be able to be the best mom for him. One of the big things I remember, that one of her big concerns was that he was going to be laying in a hospital dying somewhere and she would never know. This is such a simple thing, but that was her concern as a mother. And we told her that we certainly hoped that we'd be able to keep contact with her, that a lot would depend on her and would also depend on how Alex was. Like I said, it was about 13 months before we were able to adopt, because his dad sort of came back into the picture from out of state and tried to keep custody of him. During the time from when she relinquished her rights until we adopted, which was about 11 months later, we kept in contact with her all along. We emailed, we sent text messages. She couldn't see Alex during that time, but we were able to keep in contact. And I was looking back last month at all of the record emails that she and I sent. We were emailing like every week and just, simple, this is what's going on in our life, how are you doing, just getting to know each other. Even to the point where like 3 weeks went by and I was like, did she relapse? Like what happened? Like why haven't I heard from her? Like it was that good of a contact where we knew that if we didn't hear from her, something was going on. But through that time, we sort of got to know her. When we were finally able to adopt Alex, we started visits right away with her and we just supervised things. This is a visit we had at the park. We invited her to things he was participating in so she could be there to watch him. Boundaries. I am actually going to send around an email that I sent to her right before we actually started having these supervised visits, because I think you'll be interested to see what kind of boundaries we set. But some of the boundaries we set were about how it was really going to be on our terms. We weren't going to just go set up, a weekly visit like we had done during foster care. We would just sort of schedule it when Alex wanted to see her and when it was convenient for us. And we sort of set those boundaries up at the beginning, and then as she has, complied with those and hasn't ever crossed those boundaries, we've been able to relax them a bit to the point where he's, 16 and he spends time with her when he wants to. We don't even really, all we do now is he says, can I have a visit? I say, sure, when, and I drop him off. Or even now he's 16, he jumps on his bike and rides down to the mall and they meet up, but it's developed over time from the time when he was, starting these visits when he was 10 up until he's 16 now. We've built that relationship where we trust that he's going to be safe with her and that we know how she's doing. Currently, we still stay in contact mostly through Facebook. And like I said, he still keeps in contact with her of his own, when he wants to. As a teenager, not as much. And then because of that, he's been able to stay in contact with some other extended family members as well as aunts and uncles and cousins. Just a few things on his dad. His dad does not live in the state and did not during the whole case. We did get to know him a little bit during the case as he was trying to get custody of him. And we felt like he was a safe person. There were just reasons that it wasn't going to be in Alex's best interest to live with him. And so we have encouraged a relationship there, but Alex hasn't really desired to have that relationship, and so we've just sort of left it open. It's up to Alex. Early on, when Alex was still young, his dad would, send a text message to my husband saying, hey, why won't Alex ever talk to me? He never responds to my emails. And we just sort of said, he just doesn't want to right now, but you just need to be ready to be honest when he's going to ask questions one day and just be ready. And so that's sort of the relationship we've had with him. So just some things we've learned from Alex in this first case is that trust was gained over time. But as we did that, it's led to a positive relationship now. Inviting this mother to events her son participated in is a really easy way for you to be there and see how their interactions go. And then strict, clear boundaries were set at first and then relaxed as we saw that things were going well. So moving on to our next case, the Lindquist. Like I said, we got Jeremy, Summer, and Brad. And we got their parents. Mom and Dad came into this case not doing so well. We only got to know Mom very, very briefly before she spent most of the case time in jail. We did get to know their dad a little bit better throughout the case. There was 13 months from the time they were in our home until 15 months. 15 months from the time they were in our home until parents relinquished their rights. So it was quite a long, lengthy case. We got to know the dad a lot during that time through team meetings and just got to sort of know what kind of person he was. I'm really just some ways we used their dad was other than getting to know him, we also used him as a contact for health concerns. As we had some things going on with the kids where we were like, is this something you've experienced in the past? We were able to have that relationship where we could ask him if this was a new thing or it was something that they'd seen before. But like I said, eventually parents did both voluntarily relinquish their rights, and we submitted our petition to adopt right about the same time as they had a great aunt right here who decided that she was also going to submit a petition to adopt. And that was really hard. They were not. That great aunt was not living in the state. This is our kid's grandpa and his sister. They weren't living in the state. I was quite angry. They came in after our family was very settled. They'd been with us for 15 months. And I was really quite angry, like, why would you be coming in trying to ruin our family? But some things this is where empathy really came into place. I was really upset, and she really didn't like me. She thought I was a really terrible mother for the kids. And so there's a lot of hard feelings there. And as we sat in, best interest hearings, trying to, as the judge trying to determine what's in the best interest of the children, I heard a lot of bad things about my parenting style, and there was just a lot of hard feelings there. But we did really think it was a relationship that was important to try to maintain still. We did feel that it was good for the kids. They had grown up. They had grown up with these people. Their kids grew up in Kansas, which is where they live. They didn't have a relationship before they moved to Utah. And so we thought it was something important to keep. And so as we sat in the court hearings, listening to their sides or listening to why, the relationship, who they were, we realized that this family had experienced a lot of loss in their life. They had lost their grandma had passed away very suddenly, shortly before this case all began. And they lost the kids, moving to Utah, and then they lost them into the child welfare system, and they were losing, their daughter to drugs, and just a lot of loss. And they realized how important it was for them to keep this relationship, and we knew it was important for our kids as well. And so after we were able to adopt, we did send emails to both of them saying that we hoped that they would still stay in contact with us, that we could still develop some kind of relationship, even though it would be a long distance relationship. And it took a whole year before I ever heard anything back, because there was a lot of hurt feelings there. But after that year passed, time just sort of healed, everything to the point where we're at today. It's been 3 years. And they're just an extended family member. They have come, this is a picture actually in our home about a year and a half ago when they came to visit from Kansas. They've got plans to come visit again in a couple of months. So we've kept in contact. They send packages for birthdays and Christmas and other holidays. And so they've become just a good extended family for our kids, and someone that they look forward to seeing and hearing from and emailing and just, however you keep in contact in this, day. We've also gotten to know a lot of the family members on the father's side. This is their dad here, and their grandma, great-grandma, aunts, cousins. And then over here we've got grandma again, and grandma's sister and husband. And these are people that actually came into our life after adoption. We didn't have any relationship with any of these people before, but except for grandma. We did have a relationship with grandma before, because she had come to a lot of the visits and team meetings and things with dad. But we got to know these people after adoption, and really for us, they have become a second extended family that even we feel that we have. Just sort of interesting side note is that these folks here are actually living in Hawaii, which is why they wouldn't be a good fit for the kids, obviously. But we got to know them when they came. I think it's been like 2 years ago. They came to visit. We got to know them a little bit, and then she's actually had us help out her sister. Sort of to be the one, like, can you keep an eye on my sister and let me spend a little money secretly to help her out, and just she sort of used us. And then when we went to Hawaii for our anniversary last year, we actually had like a 3-hour layover in Honolulu. She picked us up, took us to lunch, showed us the island in 3 hours. Like, it's something I didn't really expect when I was sitting in your place, that I actually got some other family members that I wouldn't have expected. These other folks live in St. George, so we don't see them very often, but when we drive through, we stop and have lunch together. As far as boundaries go, we've had to be really careful. While the kids were in foster care, Mom and Dad were not very consistent at all with showing up for visits. we had a lot of times where we would go to a visit and we would wait there at the caseworker's office and no one would show up. And so it was very traumatizing for the kids as they weren't, we weren't there, parents weren't there, we were waiting. And so when we adopted, we did have to be really careful. We had to set some good boundaries, saying, we told all the family members that we would be waiting 6 months before we had any contact with them, between them and the kids. As it turned out, we started contact a little earlier than that because we thought that things were really going well in our family. But we told them, give us 6 months to sort of see what's going on with our family before we start visits with you. For a while, their mother, she did get out of jail and she was doing pretty well. And so after a few months after we adopted, we did start doing some phone calls with her. She wasn't living in the States, so it was a safe place to start. And after a while, those phone calls just stopped happening. She wasn't there anymore for them. She sort of relapsed into some of her problems. Where we're at today is I have contact with her through email. She emails me about once a year saying, can I please talk to my kids? And I just say, when you start emailing me consistently and I know how you're doing, then we'll visit that. And we do this about once a year, have the same conversation. Recently got on Facebook with her so I can keep a better eye on what's really going on with her. She's not in a place where we're having any kind of contact with our kids, with her and the kids, but we're still in contact with her and we're still trying and hopeful that one day something will change. And that's, I think, a really good lesson to keep in mind, is that sometimes those parents are not going to be in a place to have contact with the kids, but that doesn't mean that you can't. As an adult, you can have a relationship with someone, and it may end up being good for the kids, even if they know that you've tried. So some things we learned about this, and I'm going to actually talk a little bit more about their dad because we actually got a lot better relationship with him, but a little side note here is that not all the relationships are positive. The relationship with the mom isn't a positive relationship, and we are able to recognize that. It's important to forgive things that go on in the case for the sake of the children. I could have held a lot of grudge against this great aunt for forever for coming in trying to adopt, but that wouldn't have helped the kids who wanted that relationship with their family from Kansas. Try to understand and have empathy for the extended family. I know when I was sitting in your place, we always just sort of thought of mom and dad. But there's cousins, there's aunts and uncles, there's grandparents that also want a relationship with the children, and oftentimes they may be good, safe people that for whatever reason couldn't have the kids as kinship. So keep that in mind, that these people have lost something as well. And then for us, we discovered extended family can be a really good support. I've been really grateful to have their great-grandma because when we've had to fill out health forms, like what your family history is, I just send her an email saying, can you tell me if your family history has any of these things in it? And so she, that's nice to have that for support as well, even just for medical needs that you have. Now I want to talk about their dad, who you notice here we call Uncle Brad, and that's another boundary that we've had to set with him, or not with him so much, but with the kids. So as far as Brad went here, he really went up and down in his addiction recovery. He had times where he was doing really well, and during those times where we'd seen some real consistent doing well, we did arrange visits with the kids, but with boundaries, again, because there hadn't been a lot of consistency during the foster care visits, we had to be really careful. So the things we did is we would arrange a visit with him. We'd say we're going to meet at West Jordan Park. And then we'd tell our kids we're having a family park day. And we would just show up at the park and play. And if he happened to show up, that was just a pleasant surprise. And if he didn't show up, the kids didn't know at all. And that has worked out really well for us. And we did that for quite a while with wherever we were going. It was just something we decided to do. And if a grandma showed up or an uncle, dad showed up or whoever. And that worked out really well because even when he came, he was sometimes an hour late. And so at least they weren't sitting there waiting for the whole hour, but then they still got to see him. But like I said, he had a lot of ups, but he also had a lot of downs as well. And during the time that he was, down in his, trying to go through rehab programs, the kids did not see him at all, but David and I continued to. We went to visit him in his rehab center a couple of times just to give him some updates on how the kids are doing. He spent some time in jail. and we sent emails and just sort of stayed in contact with him. We got actually a really good relationship with him to the point, and this is probably going to shock you, is we actually had him live with us for about 8 months last year. And for us, that was a really important, that was something that we felt really good about. I'm not saying that will ever be any of your story, but for us, we felt good about that, and he did. But because of that, we really had to set this boundary of who he is. He is not Dad, he is Uncle Brad. And that is what we called him. And to this day, even though he's been gone now for 8 months or something, the kids still refer to him as Uncle Brad. When can we talk to Uncle Brad? How's Uncle Brad doing? That's just how the relationship has gone, where we had to set that boundary with him that he wasn't going to be parenting the kids, and we had to set the boundary with the kids that he wasn't going to be parenting the kids, that they would come to us still for permission to do things. And so that's been, a really great blessing, and it's been a blessing for him as well, because he didn't really have any family that was supportive of him in his recovery. And so it's given us that, and it's given our kids that. During the time that he was living with us, we did have some different problems come up where we didn't realize that maybe the kids were still suffering so much, feeling like he'd abandoned them. But at the same time, it helped them realize that he really did love them and hadn't abandoned them. It was just, his addiction. And we were able to have those open relationships and open conversations with the kids about why, he's here. We're helping him recover from his addiction. And why is he leaving? He's leaving because we no longer can help him with his addiction. And being able to have those really open conversations with the kids has been really, really good. Because I can show these few pictures in front of our house with the kids, all having fun together. So things that you can learn from this, even though, like I said, this isn't going to be your story, most likely. Some things you can learn from this, though, is that you need to set boundaries with the children. If you're going to keep a relationship with parents after adoption, it's really important that they understand that they're still, your parent, and this is some extended family member. Biological parents need coaching. Even foster, you're still in the fostering stage, but you might need to help coach them a little on how to be a parent. Tell them it's okay to tell their kid no, and help them like that. And then for us, having him at our home helped the children process some previous abandonment issues, and it also brought other issues to the surface that we hadn't known, which bad and good to know that. Our next case after that, after we had adopted Lindquist kids, was the Cleggs. And this is Kara and Gary, and their parents, Megan and Jason, and I refer to them by name because they're some of our best friends now. So when the kids were placed with us, I'll just go here. The kids were placed with us in July 2014, so it's been 3 years ago. They were placed with us in July. They lived with us for 8 months. For the first little bit, Mom and Dad were not doing so well. They had a lot of tough conversations in court as the judge told them they were going to be losing their kids if they didn't shape up and make the changes they needed to. But through all of that, we really tried to be supportive and encouraging to them. We went to every court case with them. And after we listened to the things the judge said, I always sent them a text message after saying, you guys, you really can do this. You've got it. We know you can do this. Just keep trying. One thing with having 4 kids you've already adopted through foster care is that 6-year-olds get ideas about what's going to happen to them. And talking on the phone with her mom one night, which was part of their reunification plan, was to have nightly phone calls. She told them that we were going to be adopting her. So you can imagine Mom was quite upset about that. And, caseworker called me, he's like, what happened? I'm like, well, I can only imagine that she figured that out because everyone else is adopted. But I made it a point the next time I saw Mom to face-to-face say, no, we didn't say her that. We're on your side. We're here to help you get your kids back. Everything we can do. So that was really important to be able to say that to her. Anyways, after a couple of months, Mom and Dad had something click in their brain that they're going to change because they're going to get their family back. It was really wonderful to see. And they made some really great changes. They moved from the Rose Park area out to Harriman. So huge change. They got rid of family and friends that were not being supportive of them. And they got out to Harriman sort of alone. You know, they had some good support in their new neighborhood, but they were sort of alone out there. So one thing we were concerned, so as the time was approaching for reunification, for them to go back home for their trial home placement, we were really concerned how Mom was going to do, because she was actually pregnant and about to have a baby the very next month. And so we were concerned how she was going to do with a new baby, being full-time mom to the kids after it had been a couple of years for her. And so David and I decided one night, about a month before they were going home, just to have dinner with them. Food is always the way to have these awkward conversations. You just get it together, and or good way to get to know people. Actually, it wasn't an awkward conversation, but that's a good way to get to know people. Anyways, we had dinner together and just sort of got to know each other and visited, and gave them our support and how happy we were that they were going to getting the kids back. And then we said, we would really like to stay in contact with you guys, and if you're willing, we'd like to be your family and your friends that you have given up. And they were really touched, and they took us up on that. When the baby was born, we had Kara and Gary stay with us for a couple of days, and then when the baby had some health concerns and was back in the hospital, Kara and Gary came and stayed with us again for a couple of days. Since that time, we've just sort of gotten together, at our house for, birthdays or whatever, we've just gotten together. The family has since moved on to Colorado now with a really excellent job. And we stay in contact now through text messages, emails. And the relationship we've established, again, is an aunt and uncle. We are now, Aunt Jen, Uncle David. Our kids are cousins to each other, and that's just sort of how we establish the relationship and the boundaries, that is how things are going to be for us. The things that we learned from this is that relationships do not have to end with reunification. I think sometimes when we were sitting in your place, we thought how sad that's going to be when we've had these kids with us for so long. But if you're able to establish that relationship, it doesn't have to be over with, and that helps a lot. Foster parents can support the success of reunification. I think the fact that they knew they could call on us, and there's some other things where when Megan was learning to be a mom again, because for her, she had been out of the home for a couple of years because she was the one with most of the problems. She was learning to be a mom again. She would often call me up and say, I'm having this problem with Kara, what would you suggest? Having that support is really important. And then keeping a relationship after reunification also benefits the foster family. We've got 4 kids that have already had loss in their families by being removed from mom and dad before, having to deal with another loss of the foster brother and sister going home. It's a really hard loss. But because we knew we were still going to see them, it made it a lot easier. It was just like cousins going home, and we're going to see them next time they come over. And that's the relationship that we've been able to have. It's harder now that they don't live in Utah. But even then, they came and visited last week, and we saw them. In these cases, and I am going to still talk about our case that we're in right now, but in these past cases, some of the commonalities is that in the 3 cases, at least one parent had a negative experience in foster care as a youth. And so they came into this already protective of their kids, not wanting their kids to have the same experience that they had. And in every case, the parents were really grateful that we just took their kids in as our own kids. They just were ours, and we treated them just like they were ours. For us,
what Jason said about if he'd had that experience.
Yeah, Jason has told me many times. Jason's experience in foster care was very traumatizing. Like, he says he's got PTSD from it. But he told me so many times that if his experience had been anything like his daughter's, that he might not have been so messed up as a young adult. So it's really important there. Every case that we've had has involved extended family members. So keeping that in mind. Like I said, when I was in your spot, I really was just thinking mom and dad. But you've got all these extended family members as well. In every case, the parents wanted what was best for their children. And we've gained more positive family relationships as a couple than we would have had just on our own. Our latest foster care case, like I said, it's brand new. It's like less than a month old. And so it's actually been really interesting because since we've been doing this class, we haven't had any more placements up until this time, and this class has actually like made me totally different how we approached it. And so I thought that'd be interesting to share. In the past with our other cases, it's always sort of been like awkward at the beginning, like, okay, you're the biological mom and I'm the foster mom and hi. And this time I was like, I'm going to be a good example for everything I've been telling these people for the last 2 years. We immediately, first time I met the mom, I said, this is my Google Voice number and can I get your number? Like we made that contact right off the bat. And that's how, one question sometimes people have is how do you keep your stuff private? We use Google Voice and we use a different email from our everyday email. So there's some things that we feel like if we needed to cancel, you know, because we got a family member that was being too, whatever, persistent, it's easy to block or change. But that's what I did. Immediately gave her my Google Voice number and asked for her cell phone number. Shortly after, we actually exchanged email addresses as well, so we could pass some information on that we needed from each other. Like I said, it's been really short and it's early on in the case, but already after our foster son had a visit on Father's Day, Mom texted me that night saying, can I call you and talk to you? And so I gave her a call, and she had a concern about something that was going on in our home that her son was very upset about. But she felt that she could actually call and tell me that. And we were able to actually talk it over. So much better than getting a phone call from the caseworker going, what's going on? Very, you know, be able to actually have the conversation with the mom and say, I hear you, I do know about this concern, thanks for sharing it with me. This is what we're doing to try to deal with this concern. You know, so much more liberating to be able to have that conversation yourself instead of through the caseworker. So that's where we're at right now. I mean, it's definitely been a lot different from the way I've done it in the past, but I love it. It's just nice to get right out there and like we're real people and we're really trying to get to know you right off the bat. Yeah, any questions? Yes.
How many kids do you have right now?
We've got 5 in our home right now. Yes.
So, this is more for David. I think this is the first husband I've seen in the presentation so far.
Or stand up.
Get closer to the mic here. No, I'm just kidding.
I technically work with you, so you can feel free to pay me back.
Oh, do you guys know each other?
I don't know each other well, but we've seen each other.
Oh, that's
Big company. Big company. What has been your experience? How much are you doing stuff? How are you involved? Any advice that you have for fathers in foster care stuff?
Yeah, so there's actually no, that's fine. There's actually quite a bit that I think I do. So obviously a big part of the empathy. Sometimes, for instance, like in this case where my wife was having problems processing, the great aunt, I was very much able to still kind of stay abstracted enough that I could figure out what was going on there for reals, which helped a lot. In terms of, we've so far had a lot of boys, and oftentimes the boys will usually have a good relationship with their mother, and so then I'm usually their mentor. Like with Alex, our very first one, I was very much kind of the mentor. I was the person who had a close relationship with them. A lot of other kids, sometimes it kind of goes where some of them have a close relationship with her and some of them might have a close relationship with me. And for the most part, I try to do as much as I can. I'm always in the mindset of I'm having this kid for a short amount of time. What can I do that might help prepare them for the life that they're going to inevitably be along to, so for good or for bad. But is there anything I can do to help them in that kind of aspect? And so I kind of approach it that way, try to make sure there's one-on-one time, teachable moments, things like that. Yeah.
I'd say he's probably a lot better at the teachable moments than me. I'm more like trying to run the house, and he's really good at pulling the kid in and just saying, let's talk for a while. He's the teacher. Other questions? Yes.
Well, this may be a little bit outside the question. I mean, you have many adopted kids. Do the kids ever show up some kind of sentiment to
go back to their family, primary family, especially when we get to teenagers age, we got a little conflict going on there. So, well, I'm leaving.
You know, we haven't really dealt with that. I think it's mostly because we're already really open with their biological family members. And so if Alex were to decide he was going to run away, we know where he ran away to. You know, like, and she would call us, yeah, because of the relationship we have. I mean, if he were to run away there, you know, she would call us and say, Alex is with me, just wanted you to know. We do have things sometimes where they're like, especially with our the three that are siblings, they have a lot of feelings towards their mom that range from hatred to who is she. Especially our youngest, who's 7 now, doesn't really remember his mom at all. I mean, he was only 2 when he's removed, and we haven't really had much of a relationship with her. But he's often saying things like, "Oh, I miss Ashley. Why, you know, I wonder why Ashley couldn't keep us." Or so the kids are always trying to make sense of their story, and so by having their relationships that are open, we're able to help them make sense of their story and who these people really are. But we haven't, as far as conflicts, you know, we haven't really had any of that. Our kids, because we're pretty honest with them about the problems that their parents have, they don't really think that would be a good idea for them to go. As unhappy as they might be with us at times, they sort of see that their parents aren't really any better off.
Have you had any kind of really serious boundary issues where you had to really lower the boom on it?
With the parents? No, I don't think so. Even when Brad was living with us, I don't know. I think he was pretty much deferred to us. So one question that we sometimes get asked in this class, which has a little to do with the boundaries there, is, actually I can't remember the question is, so I'll just say the answer. But it's the idea that sometimes people want to know if the parents respect us as the parents, and how does that work? And in our experience, and I'm sure this isn't the case for everybody, but in our experience, even when the kids have been in foster care long enough, the parents realize that they're living with us and that they sort of still defer to us. Like, I can remember times being at McDonald's for a visit with Brad when the kids were in foster care, and the kids coming up to him, "Hey Dad, can I get, you know, Diet Coke?" And he would be like, "Oh, go ask, you know, your mom," or he even be calling us mom, or "Go ask Jen." I think he usually said, "Go ask your mom." Though, like, he sort of deferred to us as the ones raising these kids right now. And so for us, that's been our experience, that the parents have often deferred to us, and we try to have that same respect for them. If the kids are heading back home, or if your reunification is definitely in the works, we try to defer to the parents when we're at visits as well. You know, they might come to ask us because they're living with us, and if it's not going to affect us at home, we will defer to, you know, why don't you go ask your mom that question instead? So there's a little some respect there. I think I saw a hand here maybe.
Well, yeah, so I guess in your cases, you've all known your parents, bio family, and they know where you live, and they've been involved. Right? Is that right?
At the moment, they all know where we live, except for the newest case. But that's always something that comes after time. Mm-hmm. Like, Alex's mom didn't know where we lived probably for like the first, how long ago did we adopt him? 6 years. She probably didn't know where we lived for like the first 4.5, 5 years. With Kara and Gary, the Cleggs, they didn't know where we lived until after the kids had already gone home. So it's always a matter of time.
So yeah, I mean, I guess our concern now is like safety and privacy initially. Is that kind of how you start out, and then?
Yeah, more or less. You know, for us, we are sort of aware that our last name is really not common. Right. It's Roscoff if you missed it. And so it's probably not hard to find us if you really want to know. So we're sort of open that way. But yeah, privacy is always an issue. That's why we use Google Voice. And when we meet, if we're meeting for a visit, we meet at a central location and things like that. It's definitely been, if they know where we live, it's been a process before that's ever happened.
So with your Google Voice, like, you didn't use like a pseudonym or anything, you use your last name?
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of people don't. That's just how we decided. I mean, our kids have all been older. You know, if you came with babies, maybe you can get away with it, but Our kids have been older, they know our last name, they're going to tell their parents somehow anyway. So for us, it wasn't something we worried about. In fact, I didn't realize it until last month when I was preparing for this, that I used my regular email with Alex's mom until we actually had 3 more kids, and then we were like, let's get a different email to use. So yeah, a lot of people have the privacy concern. For us, it hasn't been an issue for us. Other questions? Come on, I actually put on a real shirt. Just kidding.
Usually comes without a shirt.
It's your only chance. No, I guess not.
Okay, well then, cool.
So how did you help your kids process through, like, they're not going back to bio mom and dad, and that you are now their parents? Because you weren't sure if that's how it was going to end up.
Right.
How do you, like, have that conversation?
So we always sort of start out with, the kids always are asking questions, when am I going home? That's from the beginning, how long am I going to be here? And what we've always just told them is, we don't know, we don't make those decisions, but we're going to take care of you for as long as you're here. And then when we start getting to the point where we know adoption is certain, I think the kids start getting that as well, though, because they've been with you for so long. Like, I don't really remember when we started having that conversation with any of them. But after they're there for a while, they're starting to get the idea that maybe I'm not going home. And then we just sort of tell them, well, if you're not able to go home, we will adopt you. Would you like to be adopted? And we talk about what that means. And we sort of have given them that, do you want to be adopted? I mean, you don't have to get permission from them under some age. I don't know, at 12 or something. They don't really have to get permission under age 12. But we've always sort of asked them if they want to be adopted. And usually once they've decided that they want to be, then they're really just wanting to be adopted. Like, now that we've decided it, can we just get this over with and settle our life down? Like, that was actually one of the hardest things with this competing petition to adopt, because we did not tell our kids about that. They did not know that someone was coming in trying to take them away from us. We had to keep that sort of on task because we didn't think it was going to happen. But they kept wondering, like, why are you going to court like every few weeks and still not adopting us? And we just said, there's some rules that have changed in court since we adopted Alex, and it's just taking a lot longer, but we're still trying. And it really got to the point where they just wanted to be adopted. They're like, we've been sitting here for your house now for almost 2 years. Can we just be part of the family for real? And so, but yeah, we sort of try to keep it open and make sure they know that we're going to be there no matter how long. If they're there for a month, if they're there for their whole lives, we're going to be there.
What are some tips you have for helping children feel comfortable in your home and developing that relationship?
I want to repeat the question on that one.
Her question is, what tips do you have for helping the kids like get comfortable in your home and developing trust with you and them? Time. Just spending as much time with them as you can. With Alex, he was our first, he was our only child. We spent a lot of time with him, just doing different things. So I think, that's definitely was like take as much time. We've been really blessed that David has a really flexible job, and so he's always taken off, some extra time when we've gotten a new placement just to, be there to help with whatever. Except for this last one, because he's 15, and I didn't say that. He's 15, so it's a new experience too, having an older child. So we do our one we have now is 15, and with him, I don't know that Davis has much time with him, but I've got a lot of time with him. He's been, home. He's home for the summer, and I'm home, and just I think really I keep saying the same thing. I think that's it, is just taking time, and then finding out what they like. Like I try to make them something they like to eat the first week that they're there. Doing those things, find out, well, what do you like? If they're used to a diet of junk food, even though we are not junk food people at our home, I went ahead and bought some frozen burritos that first week. So he at least had something that he knew he could eat. And I think just being willing to make accommodations that might be out of your lifestyle to help fit somebody else's lifestyle a little bit better.
Time with existing family is really important too.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
so they don't feel like abducted.
Oh, I think I know what you're saying. If I say what you're, tell me, yeah, change. Sorry. Now I can't remember what I was saying. What he was saying is we've also tried to make sure that as we've brought in a new foster child, that we've still given time to our children that we already have. And that's really important too. This time with our new foster son who's 15, it's actually worked out really well because he sort of fits right in between two of our two oldest boys. But we've really, especially when we had younger ones, we really tried to make sure we spent time with the ones we already had as well. And this is one thing we learned from another foster family is weekly, date nights with one of your kids. You know, we take one of our kids out every week so that at least once a month, or now every 5 weeks with having 5 kids, they're getting some one-on-one time with us as well. And then, yeah, but time, either way, time is the answer. Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, her question is basically, after the 3 new kids were placed, did Alex have things like resurface as far as behaviors or his feelings or whatever? He had gone from being an only child for 10 years to now being the oldest of 4, and it was not a very pretty thing. He was through the biggest 10-year-old tantrums I've ever seen, and he's a big kid too. I mean, there are times where I'm just holding him in timeout, you know, big tantrums. But as far as any of his past insecurities or anything, we didn't really see anything like that come up. But we definitely saw the sibling rivalry, I am no longer the center of your world or anybody's world anymore. And even with him, I feel like we continue to see that. I mean, it's been 6 years, but he's always going to want to be the only child. And so because of that, David spends more time with him than any of the kids because he sort of needs that more than anyone else. So, yeah.
It's one of the things I think that when we talk about spending that time with other kids, it's one of the things I think that we learned, or I came to realization of, which was when we got the 3 kids, we were both working, we were both exhausted, and they needed all of our attention. And so we gave them all of our attention, probably by mistake, because by doing that, we ended up neglecting Alex. And so Alex then gets no attention, so what's he going to feel? He's going to feel replaced. He's going to feel that he's no longer special and he's no longer needed, and he's probably going to have some ill feelings towards the 3 kids, which he did. And so it just kind of, you've got to make sure that as you do bring in somebody new, that they're not completely taking over all of your attention, even as much as they might need it. So.
Yes. Yeah, the only court thing that really took a lot of time was with the competing petition, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But yeah, I think if we had just gone with kids who were already legally free, we would have missed out on the kids would miss out on having those relationships as well, and we would have missed out on those. So I probably wouldn't change that, but that's our experience, I guess. Yes.
Go from introducing them as my foster sister to just my sister, or
titles? Yes, titles is your question. Okay, well, as far as when we meet a new foster child, we always introduce ourselves by our first names, and we tell them that they can call us that, or if they want to call us, mom or dad or whatever is comfortable for them, we tell them that. And a lot of it has to do with age. Alex was 9 when he came with us, and it was quite a few months before he started calling us mom and dad. And I'm pretty sure he called him dad before he called me mom, because like I said, he has a relationship with his mom. He always will, and I will always be the other mom, and I've learned to mostly deal with that. But he did call us mom and dad after some time. With the younger 3, they started calling us mom and dad probably within like the first week. And it was mostly because they had a bossy 10-year-old foster brother who was saying that's mom and dad, not Jen and David. And then as far as Kara goes, she started calling us mom and dad the very first day, and we thought that was weird. Like, she had to have something going on that she was so easily giving up her mom and dad. So that was I wouldn't say that's normal at all. And then Aiden is 15, and he is, we're Jen and David. We probably always will be. He's 15. So that's how we do that. And then as far as introductions go, for me, when I'm introducing a foster child, it most usually is, this is my foster son. But sometimes it's, this is so-and-so, he's living with us right now. Most people know we do foster care, so it's not, something I have to explain much. But I always tell the kids, though, that we're going to treat them as ours the whole time they're there. So like when we met Aiden, we said, we're going to, you can call us Jen and David, but I'm going to introduce you as my son, and I'm going to treat you as my son for as long as you're here. And as far as the kids introducing each other, I don't really think they ever do introduce each other. I think they probably just like, this is, Summer, this is Brad, they're just by their names. They're not really who they are. Can you think of, I don't.
Yeah. Alex, even recently, when he introduced Aiden to Marie should use his name probably, but when we introduced him, he actually introduced him as, a foster brother.
Okay. He's only old enough to be doing introductions, so I don't know.
I think Brad, same way.
So they probably just introduced him as a foster. Yeah, this is my foster brother. Yeah. Other questions? I think we're good.